Hello MCU fans! Today's video is an addendum to the previous video on mapping the Phase 4 timeline without Disney+. Now, I really want to thank everybody that watches the videos and leaves comments. I read all the comments, I try to reply to every one of them, and some of the comments were excellent. They gave some really good clues to placing some of the trickier entries in the Phase 4 timeline. So let's dive right in and see what they had to say. Now, in particular, the clues were for the trickier placements of Shang Chi and Eternals. You might remember with Shang Chi, the question is it March and April timeframe because of the Qingming Festival, or July because of the date on the bus? And with Eternals, the question is it 2023, right after everybody came back from the blip, or is it 2024, due to the Captain Rogers quote that implied that, Eternals was happening after Falcon and the Winter Soldier when Sam became Captain America? All right, so Whiskey T. Fiffis made the point that Shang-Chi's placement, we should be looking at Captain Marvel's hair growth. Very interesting. So in Endgame, her hair is pretty short. Now, granted, she's got it kind of primped up there, and if it was straightened out, it would be a little longer looking, but still nowhere near as long as in Shang-Chi. So we're talking about the time frame of October of 2023 to either March, April, or July of 2024. And Whiskey's point is really neither of these is enough time for it to have grown that much, but certainly July would have given more time. Now, I did look it up, and hair grows at a rate of about ½ an inch per month. So if we go with April, it would have been about 3 inches of growth, versus July would be about 4.5. So again, to Whiskey's point, neither is really enough, but certainly I think this is one more indication that going with a later date, the date of July, is the way to go with Shang-Chi. So thank you to Whiskey for pointing this out. Then Ryan, rockstar, he pointed out that in Eternals, there is an Easter egg for the GRC. I think I might have noticed this when I first watched the movie, but I had totally forgotten about it. Notice that above the artifacts that shaped human history is an ad for the Global Repatriation Council. Welcome back, we can help. So what this means is, at the beginning of the Eternals movie, the GRC was up and running and advertising. So that's important. Now the question is, could a government organization, let alone a global government organization, have been up and running within a few weeks after people suddenly came back from the blip? And to me, it doesn't seem possible. And then you throw in like this quote from Lennox, one of the flag smashers. He said, we can't stay here for long. 6 months ago, would you have imagined the people supporting the cause like this? Well, no, of course we wouldn't imagine that, because 6 months ago, people had just come back from the blip. We would have first had the GRC have to be formed and then have to be established enough that it was actually out advertising, and then doing, in the Flag Smashers' view and many others' view, a poor job, which led to the conflict between the GRC and the Flag Smashers. So I just don't see any way that a global government organization could have been formed in October, November 2023. And I think this is another good indication that Eternals has to happen in October of 2024. So thank you, Ryan, for this great observation. Both Elliot and future history archaeologists made a point that I've actually also made in previous videos, but I forgot to mention in the timeline video, the most recent one, which is maybe the blip could have altered the dates for the cultural events. We've mentioned the fact that the Festival of Lights is really in October, but in the MCU it was in June, July timeframe. That the Eid celebration is really in June, but in the MCU it was actually in September. And the Qingming Festival is really in early April, but certainly Shang-Chi implied we're in July timeframe. Well, keep in mind, the blip is not just a 5-year blip when half the world was gone. It's really a 5-year and 5-month blip, because Infinity War was in May of 2018. Because remember, Peter Parker was still in school. His school year was almost done, but it wasn't done yet. So maybe the fact that it wasn't just 5 years, but 5 years and 5 months has messed this up. Now, nothing works perfectly. None of these are 5 months apart. That would be way too cool. But the point is, it just really messed stuff up. So if we're looking for an in-universe reason for why things are not dated based on when these cultural events happen in the real world, this may well be it. So pretty cool. Thank you, Elliot, and future history archaeologists, for mentioning this. And then Rita, I hope I'm saying that right, Rita Tabaucha, made a good point that I talked about the fact that Loki impacted the multiverse and several future entries in Phase 4, but I didn't really say how. I just said it did and moved on. So that's worth just a few points here to bring up. So thank you, Rita, for mentioning that. First of all, I do think there was a multiverse prior to Loki, because in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1 end credit scene, we saw the Watchers and Stan Lee, and they really seemed kind of bored. They didn't have a lot to do. I don't think there were a lot of universes at that point. Although I do think there were some. As long as they didn't create a Nexus event, there's no reason they would have been pruned. So, for example, I think the Sony Spider-Man universes were already out there, but just there weren't as many. However, when He Who Remains was killed, as you can see on the left, boom, the multiverse went nuts. All these Nexus events were happening. We ended up with so many different realities, and that's where I think we get the What If series. I mean, the Watcher described it as infinite realities. So suddenly now the Watchers are pretty busy. There's a lot going on. So I do think that the events of Loki and the death of He Who Remains directly resulted in the What If series. I think also it allowed the Darkhold to trick Wanda into thinking that her kids were calling out for her from the multiverse. I mean, that wouldn't have happened, I don't believe, if there hadn't been the multiverse created as a result of Loki. Likewise, the spell going so poorly in No Way Home. I think it was more than just Peter disturbing Doctor Strange while he was casting it. That was a problem. That made it go poorly. But really, this poorly, I think that's because of the multiverse explosion that resulted because of Loki. And then, of course, Multiverse of Madness. I mean, we saw tons of different universes. I think that was a result of what happened at the end of Loki. So thank you, Rita, for suggesting this. I didn't go into that, but I believe that Loki is a direct result of all of the rest of these entries that I've mentioned in Phase 4. And then, now that the Guardians of the Galaxy trailer has come out, in fact, so is Quantum Mania trailer, lots of trailers being released. But now that it's come out, we know how big Groot is going to look in what I'm guessing to be December of 2025. And yeah, he's grown quite a bit from Thor: Love and Thunder, which I date at September to October 2025. So in about a month and a half, that's impressive. Now, if you notice, his face still looks kind of young. Instead of a teenager, maybe he's in his early 20s, because he doesn't quite have the grizzled look that he had in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1. But boy, has he beefed up. He's a little jacked. So, again, is this the one flaw to the placement in Thor: Love and Thunder? I think there's so many good reasons for it being September to October. But is this the one flaw? Could be. It could be. I mean, I would argue he grew from a baby to a teenager. It took 4 years. And then he barely grew between Infinity War and Thor: Love and Thunder, and then boom, a big growth. So really, even if we went with the May 2024, because that's, I think, the earliest Thor: Love and Thunder could be, I mean, the absolute earliest, that's still quite a difference between Thor: Love and Thunder and the holiday special. So I would argue, I don't think the issue is the placement in the timeline of Thor: Love and Thunder. I think it's the age they made Groot in Thor: Love and Thunder. I don't think they did it right. But for the minute, assuming they did it right, then I'm going to have to go with he can control his own growth spurts. Nothing else could explain this much growth in a year and a half or less. So I'm going to stick with September through October of 2025 because I think for all the other reasons it makes so much sense, and we're just going to have to wait and see if we get an explanation for how Groot can power himself up. So there you have it. That's it for this video. I did update this image a little bit. Falcon and the Winter Soldier now feeds into Eternals and Moon Knight with the GRC reference. And over on the right, Loki directly now feeds into WandaVision, What If, Multiverse of Madness, and No Way Home. So I do think it's what created the multiverse mess that we're going to continue to see throughout the rest of phases 5 and 6. All right, so like this video if you don't mind. Subscribe if you haven't already. Leave comments. I love the comments. They're great. You can check out some other videos. And in the meantime, let's all enjoy the ever-expanding, ever-growing, ever-trailer-releasing Marvel Cinematic Universe.